Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Head Foundation's webinar series on building a positive school culture. Today, we will be having the third and final session in our series, Building a Positive School Culture in the New Normal. Over the last two sessions, we looked at how we can go about building a positive school culture. What are the various levers that leaders, teachers, and even students can use to build this positive school culture in their institution? We also discussed about the importance of a culture of relationship. We discussed why it was important that this culture was inculcated among the students, the teachers, the leaders, and even the community that form part of the wider school's ecosystem. This culture of relationship was important in ensuring the support, the buy-in, and the commitment of partners, particularly during times of crisis like the one we're facing right now. During our session today, we're going to explore the idea of a culture of learning. Schools as places of learning are often assumed, but is there really a culture of learning? Are students, teachers, leaders, are they genuinely learning in a school? And what can schools do to build and sustain this culture of learning? So, ladies and gentlemen, before I hand over to today's moderator, I'd just like to remind you about a quick administrative point. Many of you have requested about the certificates that we'll be issuing upon completion of your participation in this webinar series. There will be a form shared at the end of this webinar where you can sign up to receive the certificate. As I shared during our first and second session, certificates will be only issued to those who have attended the webinar, all three sessions via Zoom. So if you're tuning in to us on Facebook and would require a certificate, please do join us on the Zoom platform. So without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, it's my true pleasure to introduce our moderator for today's session and for the series, Mrs. Belinda Charles. Mrs. Charles, please.
Thank you, Vignesh, and good afternoon to all of you. A very warm welcome to those who are new to this second webinar series, talking about positive school culture in the new normal, and a special welcome to the majority of you who have been faithfully following this series. Like Vignesh has said, we've been unpacking what it means to have a positive school culture that is not afraid of change, but knows instead how to harness change to bring about growth. And in this, again, like Vignesh said, relationships are essential. You as a school leader, show with your relationships that you value every teacher and you value every student. So this afternoon, as we hear about a culture of learning for this new normal, let me welcome our three speakers for today, who will share how they have created this culture of learning, some school-wide and some system-wide. Beginning with Mrs. Wai Yin Pryke. Mrs. Pryke is currently the Director of Education and Community Outreach at the National Heritage Board in Singapore. With roots as an educator, she previously served as Director of Professional Development at the Academy of Singapore Teachers, where she oversaw the learning needs of Singapore teachers and the development of a strong ethos for the profession. Mrs. Elsie Jeremiah next joined the Ministry of Education Singapore as a teacher in 1979. Since 1998, she has served in various school leadership roles. In building a culture of learning in the schools she led, Elsie focused on building staff competencies. This was to ensure engagement in learning in every classroom, as well as an enjoyment of learning for every child, because she believed that this would enable every child to discover and pursue their passion for the betterment of society. And last but certainly not least, Ms. Yenny Dwi Maria is currently the principal at SMPN 211 Jakarta in Indonesia. She started her career in education, like the other two, as a school teacher. In fact, she was a secondary school English teacher, but she later expanded her role to be that of a curriculum and assessment writer, and then as a national teacher trainer. She began her formal leadership role as a principal in 2016. Her major concerns are the environment, literacy, collaboration, and lifelong learning, all of which are apparent in the programs she has initiated. Now, before I invite the speakers to begin, we would like to launch a poll. And we will share with you the results of the poll at the end of all the after all the three speakers have spoken and just before the Q&A. You can see the poll there. It asks, which in your view is the most important characteristic of a learning culture? And can you choose one of the four answers, please? Give you some time. Yes, I see quite a few of you have already started keying in your response. All right. And so, yes, this poll won't go away until after you've done it and then you submit. All right. Some of you might like to think a bit more. Okay. The other thing I would like to remind you is to post your questions in the Q&A box, which I hope you have been able to locate at the bottom of the screen, right? So two things, you're now responding to the poll, and later, as you have questions, please do post them in the Q&A box. Very good. We will hear first from Ms. Yenny Dwi Maria, and she will show us how she created this culture of learning, especially through distributive leadership. Yenny, please.
Thank you, Ms. Charles. Good afternoon to Venus, Ms. Charles, all panelists, and the audiences. It's an honor for me to be here in this forum. Please allow me to start sharing my screen. I'd like to give a little background information. So, as has been mentioned earlier, my full name is Yeni Dui Maria, and I am from SMPN 211 Jakarta. It is a junior high school located in the southern part of Jakarta province with 670 students and 43 teachers and staff members. It is a public junior high school, and the students are in grade 7 up to grade 9. And here is our website and some of our social media accounts. Please feel free to have a look. Up to now, all schools in Jakarta are still in lockdown, and so students are still learning from home since the 16th of March 2020 due to the pandemic. In this opportunity, I would like to share some practices of building a culture of learning and sharing that we have conducted in our schools by encouraging collaboration among teachers and other members of the school community. So the pandemic has obviously brought about a lot of fundamental changes and challenges in the school practices which we were not prepared for. Therefore, we were facing a few initial obstacles as follows. The first one is teachers' Ict Skills Gap. As might happen anywhere at the schools around the globe, there are obviously a few teachers who are already technology savvy prior to the pandemic. But there is still a substantial number of teachers who still need to improve. Apart from that, the government has also made several changes in the educational policy as a response to the pandemic and online learning. Some of them are curriculum relaxation, a shift in the learning emphasis, which require teachers to provide fun, meaningful, less burdening learning activities, and also changes in the assessment system with the eradication of national examination. And despite the challenges, every teachers need also to make sure that they are healthy and in good condition. So teachers' well-being and resilience is also another aspect that needs to be taken into consideration. Students' differences in socioeconomic conditions are another aspect to be highlighted because the majority of our students are coming from middle to low socioeconomic background, and it is essential to make sure that they have sufficient infrastructure to follow the online learning. To respond to the previous key issues, there are at least 3 areas that I am targeting. The first one is to empower teachers in terms of technology, pedagogy, and educational policy updates. And then to maintain and strengthen the bond within teachers and staff members, despite the fact that we are working separately from home. And the last one, but not least, to care for the less fortunate students by taking these steps towards a culture of learning that are training along with coaching and mentoring, virtual professional learning community forum, having cross-curriculum project-based learning, and then we also make some attachment projects to strengthen the bond within teachers. And also we have this mobilizing the wider school community to give sufficient support for the less fortunate students. And now let's see the preview of each of the program. So for training, we initially focus on the ICT skills prior to the school lockdown. So prior to the school lockdown, the government hasn't announced anything about it. But then there is a trend, that there is a signal that it's going to happen. So I made a quick decision to have this face-to-face training regarding ICT, but the face-to-face 2-day ICT training face-to-face, but it's classical approach. But moving from the classical approach, we are then giving opportunities also for teachers to receive the similar training by coaching. And so it's not a training, but it's coaching and mentoring where they can work in smaller groups with their peers or colleagues. And apart from that, at the initial stage, although we are working from home, some teachers who feel that they need assistance in terms of technicality, in terms of technology, they can always come to schools and conduct their teaching at schools. There are always support team who are ready to assist them. So schools are always open for them so that they feel comfortable with the technology. They're not worried about technical problem. And at the same time, they are not worried about the connectivity either. Then after of course, then we have several stages of lockdown. Some are lenient, like we can go out, some restrictions and work from home, and to have face-to-face training like we had before the lockdown was quite impossible. So we also have the online training with the same method, that is classical approach, moving towards to smaller scope training with coaching and mentoring. So the teachers even made a virtual PLC forum, as you can see here, social studies teacher, civics teacher, they have their own community or their own classroom so that they can study together and collaborate, and then they even practice delivering online teaching in terms of possible technical problems that they might face when they give the real teaching to their students in their own classes. So this is really helpful for them. And then this is the cross-curriculum project-based learning. The snapshot or the capture here is showing the product of collaborative learning or project-based learning between home economics and Indonesian language. So this is the product, and we were also conducting similar cross-curriculum project-based learning across other subjects when of course by considering the relevancy of the content. And then as an effort to strengthen the bond and between teachers and staff, and also to prevent further or deeper feeling of isolation and loneliness, we also had this extracurricular projects among teachers and staff so that we could interact more. Even though we are apart, we were not close physically, but we feel close because we communicated and interacted intensely when we were doing this project. This one is like singing or music project. We made it for the Ramadan festival. This is another, it's a kind of virtual touring music project. So we want to advise the students to stay at home, and if they want to enjoy the beauty of Indonesia, they can do it online, just like what we did. And here is book collective writing projects, and it's been published written by the majority of teachers. And this last slide of snapshots is showing you on the left is collaboration within a wider scope of the school community. On the left, we were collaborating with parents who contributed donation in form of cash to give assistance to the orphan students in our school. And then on the right, it's a collaboration between the alumni who were then contributing gadgets to the students who did not have gadgets for their own to do their learning. Formerly, they had to share their gadgets either with their parents or siblings to follow the online learning, but with the help from the alumni, then step by steps, this number of students who had to share is increasing. Okay. While, is decreasing, pardon me. Now, and this one, another one, this is kind of rewards for teacher that were given for their extraordinary performance. This is a kind of pleasant surprise for them because the kind of rewards that they would receive was never announced before. So it was just like a pleasant surprise on Teachers' Day, and they were really happy to receive this because it was not expected at all. Yeah. While we were implementing the steps towards building a culture of learning and sharing, we were faced by further obstacles. Naturally, teachers have different pace of learning, and as a solution, we combine the classical approach to personalized approach, and we provide full assistance and support to teachers. So for example, if it's difficult for a particular teacher to receive to understand oral explanation, then we would combine that with manual. If it's not enough, we will give screen recordings or voice note, or even face-to-face conference virtually. step-by-step guidance. So there is never no give up signal in terms of technology skills acquisition. And then, as we are all aware, the pandemic itself is already a challenge, and plus with the numerous changes in educational policies that teachers need to keep up with, teaching is even more challenging for them. Therefore, it is essential to make sure that teachers feel that they are accompanied and assisted, and they are enlightened and given step-by-step guidance about the education policy updates as the response of the pandemic. And the last issue is in terms of pedagogy. For us, especially, online learning is totally new, and not only for us, I guess, for the majority of teachers, it is school teachers, it is new. We are so much used to the face-to-face learning interaction, teaching learning activities, that it is pedagogical issues needs to be taken into considerations all the time. One of which is to put content over technology. So technology is a tool to deliver the content. So, and the delivery of the content itself should be in such a way that scaffold the students, because the online learning is very much different from the face-to-face interaction. That's why we were having refresher programs or sessions for teachers to enlighten or to highlight the pedagogical issues especially needed in this online learning. These are some important perspectives for a culture of learning. The first one is that teachers' ICT skills shouldn't hinder the teaching and learning process during the pandemic. Teachers should feel confident about their ICT literacy and their teachings. And students' learning is to be adjusted with the specific needs during the pandemic. And this is what we were trying to achieve to meet the criteria or the standard from the government as a response to the study teaching learning activities during the pandemic. And it is also important to ensure teachers' physical and mental health. When doing the project, there are so many things that we have learned. And the first one is, as a school leader, it is very important to be able to think ahead, to foresee what was coming, to see the trends, and then to anticipate and take immediate actions. So I remember like the first day of lockdown, which was the 16th of March 2020, it was like the announcement was only a day before that. 16th of March was Monday. The announcement was on Saturday, over the weekend. So if we didn't prepare ahead about the platform, the virtual classrooms and the policy and the operation procedures, probably not only the students and the parents, probably the teachers would also be panicked. And the first day of lockdown, probably the teaching learning activities were not running smoothly. But then with the anticipation much earlier, a bit early, I guess, with the training that we had, which ended up in the provision of virtual classrooms for each teacher, for each subject. So on the first day of lockdown, everything could run, I could say, quite well. No panic, no hectic condition. Things go or went on as it has stated in the SOP. And then the second thing that we learn is a leader should walk the talk. Whatever a leader is expecting to be performed by the teachers should actually be the leader's attributes. So the leader first, and somehow the teachers would follow. And then we also learned that progress check, routine progress check, keep teachers on track and on schedule. And through progress check, we are able to provide teachers with relevant, efficient, and effective support. What is it that they need? What is the problem now? And what is the solution that we can give them? So routine progress check motivates teachers to keep going. Is with this, I think there is never a signal of giving up by the teachers. And another thing, and I am so very happy about it, is teachers are actually proud. If they feel that their school is organized and somewhat more ahead, somewhat more organized, and then more structured and ahead of other school in the region. So they are really happy about it. And when they are contented, they are even willing to contribute much more. So they don't think about working hours. They don't mind to contribute even outside working hours. And another one is that recognitions and rewards motivate teachers and spur them to do even or to contribute even more and better, especially when the acknowledgement and rewards was not announced before. It was like a pleasant surprise for them, and yeah, pleasant surprises are always pleasant. So it really shows that they appreciate this kind of attention that we give to them. Now, I would like to share the most important lesson that we have come up with as a result of the steps that we take to build a culture of learning, that is distributive leadership. When teachers work in smaller teams, yeah, it is very apparent that they are all very creative and also resourceful and full of innovations. I would like to share two of the themes that we have in our schools and the innovations or remarkable achievement that they have made. The first one is the innovations done by Students Affairs team, who have come up with variations in morning assemblies. So during this online learning, every morning, we have virtual morning assembly. And the Students Affairs team have managed to vary this morning assembly to avoid boredom and to make the activities more interesting, meaningful for the students. So the variations are regarding the mode, the scope, whether it is school-based activities, level-based activities for grade 7, grade 8, and grade 9 in 3 huge classes, or by classroom-based with the homeroom teachers. And they also vary the organizer, whether it is the school team who organize, the homeroom teachers, or the students on duty. Students take turns to organize the morning assembly. So they even have their own MC and the meeting coordinator, something like that. And also variation in the interaction, whether it is streaming, or when students basically just watch, or there are interaction through Google Meet or Microsoft Teams when we need bigger classrooms. As for the activities, there are so many activities that they have come up with. Some of the activities are done daily, some are monthly or weekly, some are twice a week. The daily activities is, for example, national anthem and traditional songs. And about twice or 3 times a week, we have Holy Quran recitation and memorization, and then Bible study for the Christian. And students also watch inspirational videos. They have to watch, and then after that, they take turns to express their thoughts about the videos, about 3 up to 5 students in one occasion. And there are also reading and writing club or literacy club. And students also give weekly reflections. They take turns to do this in the morning assembly. And there is also talent show and some other activities. I will show you now the capture of some of the activities. On top left, this is actually our Islamic religion teacher. So he is giving a teaching, but he put it in the form of drama, and the students, the Islamic students, they watch the video and they have to share their thought later. Here in the middle, this is actually only no interaction. Students just watch the morning assembly during a national celebration, National Day event. And here is the meeting in Microsoft Teams. They watch inspirational video, and over here it's also inspirational video. And there is also talent show, and this is the national anthem that we play the first thing in the morning, where the student had to turn on their video and stand up to give their respect to our national anthem. Another distributive leadership has also been exhibited by the public relation teams. They have found numerous ideas to make our social media account popular. So on the in the middle, this is our YouTube account. This was created during the pandemic, and up to now we have more than 1,300 subscribers. And as you can see, the view here is even more than 10,000, and there are variations. So the public relation team have come up with so many interesting ideas to be put into video, to be wrapped into a video and uploaded in our YouTube account. And on the right side, this is our Instagram account. And the team has also managed, the latest innovation was they have a program that they will post an original quote for every teacher, 1 quote per week. As you can see, it's here. It's a quote for teachers. Can be in Bahasa Indonesia or in English. To close my presentation, I would like to share my personal philosophy. So in Bahasa Indonesia, the word teacher is guru. Guru stands for digugu and ditiru. Literally means trusted and followed. So a teacher is someone who is trusted and followed. But this well-known notion challenged me with this unpredictability of the school practices, unpredictability of the future. Can we still take this well-known notion for granted? Is a teacher always someone who can be followed, who can be trusted and followed? And that is why I make my own definition of a teacher. So my definition is a true teacher is a lifelong learner who never stops to improve him and herself. And with this, I'll end my presentation. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Ms. Charles?
Thank you, Yenny. And what a great quote to end it on. that yes, if we want to help our teachers, we have to ourselves model the lifelong learning, because that is the only way to start this culture of learning in our schools. Thank you very much. You've been frank about the obstacles, but just as importantly, you showed how those obstacles could be overcome. Wonderful. And now next, we have Mrs. Elsie Jeremiah. Elsie just retired this year, but she's been leading her last school for almost a decade. As she takes you along her journey of leadership, you will see how learning is key to every successful step. Elsie, please.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being with us this afternoon. And this afternoon we are gathered to discuss this topic of how we can develop a culture of learning in our schools. And I will be sharing with you the Kuo Presbyterian Secondary School experience in its efforts to build such a culture. I say it is efforts because I don't claim that we actually can say we have established the culture, but indeed there was a lot of effort in this area. So I would like to start this afternoon by asking you a question. What would you say is the reason for schools to exist? Being educators, you would probably say that schools exist to equip students for the future. The layman would probably say that schools exist so that children can learn the skills that they require for the future. Now, as we began this session just now, Vignesh mentioned this. He said that schools are assumed to be places of learning, but are people really learning? So the common understanding is that schools and learning are almost synonymous. But we all know that this question that Vignesh asked, are people really learning, is a very real question for all of us who are in education. The challenge of building a strong culture for learning in our schools is a constant work in progress. It is uppermost in our minds. We all want it. We are there, working at it every day, but we can never say that we have arrived. Before we go into the how of this afternoon's discussion, I would like to share working definition for the word culture. The Cambridge International Dictionary of English defines culture as a way of life or the general customs and beliefs of a particular group of people at a particular time. Hence, in building a learning culture, we need to shape beliefs about learning and adopt daily actions that will promote a particular way of life where learning becomes the norm for everyone in the organization. Now, the prerequisite for a learning culture in a school is that there must be shared belief that every child is capable of learning and succeeding. A high priority must be given to maintaining positive, caring relationships in the school and a safe environment, devoid of free, of bullying and other kind of dangers that may prevent students from learning must be provided so that everyone dares to learn, dares to try out new ideas, and dares to take risk. Shaping the culture of learning, shaping culture begins with shaping beliefs, which will then shape behavior. It is important that the desired culture, both in terms of the beliefs and the actions that go with it, are clearly articulated so that everyone in the community knows what is expected of the team. In a school, in most schools, there would be a mission statement. And this mission statement will spell out the purpose of the school and what it stands for. So at Kuo Presbyterian, the school mission statement articulates the purpose, the what we do, and the kind of culture, or rather the how of how we want to do it. So what do we do as a school? It states here in the mission statement that the end goal is for the holistic development of every child. So we look at every child in terms of his physical being, his intellectual being, his social and emotional being, as well as the values that we want to instill in the child that will make him an asset to the community and give him a compass for life. So how do we do these things at a school? This talks about the culture that we want to nurture. All right, so there are two things mentioned here. There is an environment and the methodologies. First, we provide a nurturing environment, an environment in which people will grow, a safe and welcoming learning environment. Secondly, we design enjoyable learning experiences so that students are actively engaged in learning. Having articulated the desired culture, how do we start moving the pieces to make things happen so that we are building the learning culture that we desire to see? It all begins with a child. Stephen came to us. Let me just give you this example of Stephen. He came to us after having done fairly well in the primary school leaving examinations, which is the final year examinations in primary schools before students can graduate to the secondary school. Within the first term of joining Kuo Chuan Presbyterian, however, teachers noticed that Stephen's grades were dropping, that he was listless and inattentive in class, and he was beginning to attend school late. From a conversation with him, the form teacher learned that Stephen was going through a bad patch. His world fell apart when his father died of a heart attack on the eve of the release of his primary school leaving exam results. The family was supposed to be going on a vacation. Instead, he spent the entire holidays in great grief. He began feeling that there was no point in the effort he had put in to please his dad. And when school began for the new year in a new school, he just couldn't find the effort, the strength to press on in his studies. A part of him knew that the responsible thing to do would be to continue to work hard. But despite trying, he was unable to concentrate on his work. The tears flowed freely as he spoke to his teacher. His form teacher took him under his wing, mentored him, and got him the necessary counseling and academic support to get him back on track. The form teacher follows him through to Sec 2, and the mentoring continues. By year end, Stephen had begun to show improvement in his work and appeared to be a much happier child in school. It's been 3 years now that his teacher has been journeying with him. And this teacher continues to mentor him until today. And he believes that he will see him graduate respectably at the end of 2021. At Kuo Chuan Presbyterian Secondary School, teachers invest heavily in relationships with their students. They spend time on a regular one-on-one conversations with students to get to know them as individuals. Driven by the belief that every child can learn, they seek to understand the reasons for lackluster performance and inappropriate behavior. And they try to be part of the solution so that the child is able to get back on his feet. Most teachers will stay with their classes for 2 years, 2 consecutive years. Information gathered about the child is recorded and handed over to the next teacher in the 3rd year. In this way, the school is able to support the child adequately throughout the 4 or 5 years that they will be with us. At Kuo Chuan Presbyterian Secondary, we also believe that strong peer relationships are good soil for nurturing a strong culture of learning. Structures are in place to promote positive peer relationships, resulting in peers looking out for one another and strengthening the culture of learning in the school. Peer bonding begins the minute a new cohort comes into the school. Student leaders are attached to each class to help bond the class and promote the school culture of care and collaboration. New students soon learn about the culture and adapt to the school culture. After the formal orientation program is over, student leaders will continue to journey with the class, meeting them on a weekly basis for the next 10 weeks until the class is comfortably settled in. Healthy peer relationships results in peers supporting one another in their learning, meeting in groups after school to complete their homework and assignments, coaching one another according to their strengths, and being cooperative in their combined projects. Now in this picture, we see the secondary 1 students in their first year. They're working together on a class banner that unites them and holds them together, gives them a sense of identity as a class. And this is a group of two secondary 4 students. This class decided to put up little letter boxes in their class where they would leave notes of encouragement to their peers in the run-up to the national exams. Such student behavior, where everyone is taking responsibility for their own learning, is evidence of the culture of learning that we want to see. School-home partnerships are a critical factor for building a culture of learning. Strong, trusting school-home partnerships are usually a sure win ingredient in promoting a culture of learning. At Kuo Chuan Presbyterian Secondary, the school takes the first step in inviting parents into the school and sharing the year's program, the curriculum and assessment processes, as well as providing samples of project works, etc., that were done by previous cohorts, so that parents have a clear idea of the kind of learning experiences their child will be having in the school. A trusting partnership such as this helps build commitment to learning in the child, as both the parents and the school share the common goal. Staff empowerment through intentional, sustained professional development is another critical ingredient for a strong learning culture in the school. Sustained professional development throughout the year equips teachers with deep skills and conceptual understanding, and enables them to design engaging and enjoyable lessons. At Kuo Chuan Presbyterian Secondary School, time is set aside on a fortnightly basis for teachers to come together to sharpen pedagogical skills and to learn the new skills that may be needed for every cycle of change in their curriculum. Teachers are also encouraged to participate in learning opportunities at intra-school and national platforms. Here we see teachers from the science department learning together. At KCPSS, we prioritize creating space and time for teachers to toy with various teaching and learning strategies in order to birth new ideas and innovative ways of engaging students for deep learning. Every teacher is allocated time, and funds are also made available for teachers to develop good ideas into teaching tools that they can use in their classes. Opportunities are also provided for teachers to share their innovations in teaching strategies at national and international platforms. Such experiences promote staff collegiality and encourage teamwork and experimentation among staff, thus strengthening the culture of team learning among staff. Here we see students engaged in learning concepts in geography using a board game that was designed and produced by our own teachers. The learning here is self-directed and students are having fun. Lessons are designed to allow inquiry and exploration so that students can draw their own conclusions about important issues. And this promotes engagement and enjoyment in the class. All this is evidence of how, when teachers are motivated learners themselves, the joy of learning is naturally passed on to students. And this project done by our teachers was actually shared at an international conference. Here we see a group of students engaged in a challenging and meaningful learning task that promotes rigor in learning. There's a strong focus on quality learning at Kuo Chuan Presbyterian Secondary School. This kind of rigor in learning creates a culture in which students are expected to learn successfully in their own ways and at their own pace. They are supposed to persevere, stay with the issues, stay with the problem until they are able to understand and master the concept. Here we see a group of students doing a peer critique of artwork. When learning and development is integral or essential element of school culture, it will be pervasive. You will see it everywhere. Everyone learning and in a constant search for better ways of doing things in all areas. Such peer critique hinges on strong peer relationships, and this is something we focus on building throughout the 4 years. Just when the vibrant learning culture was beginning to take shape in the school, 2020 happened, the great disruption brought about by the pandemic. In the next few slides, I will share how the existing culture of learning helped the school to sustain student learning and engagement through a period of change and uncertainty. New school routines had to be implemented. All school routines changed. New routines such as daily temperature taking were introduced. There were no more mass gatherings for assembly in the morning, no more daily singing of the national anthem, no more group work in the class during lessons, no more playing of games during recess. We needed safe distancing. It was surreal, but students adapted quickly and teachers did their best to keep learning engaging and enjoyable. Then we went into 4 full weeks of home-based learning. People couldn't leave their homes. Children were beginning to feel isolated and energy levels were dropping. During this time, teachers would greet the students online every morning. There'll be a motivational message screened online, and teachers would encourage students through bonding sessions online. Students will be encouraged to write notes of appreciation, encouragement to one another, and to keep each other going in their learning. Teachers also attempted to sustain interest and engagement in learning through creative ways, such as role play, as in this literature lesson, where students were asked to dress up and come to class for the lesson. It was truly encouraging to see such commitment as teachers continued to innovatively engage students online during home-based learning. Children were able to come back to school physically in the month of June 2020. It was with much trepidation and many new routines. Measures were in place to ensure that students didn't mingle, that they maintained a safe distance from each other at all times while lessons were being conducted in the class. They had to have their masks on the whole day, and they had to make sure that they watched out for one another's well-being. They had to have fixed seating in the classrooms and even in the canteens. Everyone understood the need for these measures. Nevertheless, the school tried its best to observe key learning events and celebrations and maintain a sense of normalcy as best as we could. So here we see the students marching in with the national flag. This is usually part of the National Day Parade, when the whole parade square will be lit up in red and white by more than 1,000 people. But in 2020, it was a very quiet parade that was streamed to the students in the classrooms. For more from Kuchon Presbyterian Secondary School, you may refer to the school website. But in conclusion now, I would like to go back to our opening question. Why do schools exist? And to the statement about whether we are able to assume that learning is taking place in school. I would like to invite you now to hear the answer from a child as I read to you this letter, which was first published in 1993 in the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. Dear teacher, today Mummy cried. Mummy asked me, Jody, do you really know why you are going to school? I said, I don't know why. She said, it is because we are going to be building me a future. I said, what is a future? What's one look like? Mummy said, I don't know, Jody. No one can really see all your future, just you. Don't worry, 'cause you'll see. That's when she cried and said, oh, Jody, I love you so. Mummy says everyone needs to work really hard for us kids to make our future the nicest ones the world can offer. Teacher, can we start today to build me a future? Can you try especially hard to make it a nice, pretty one just for Mummy and for me? I love you, teacher. Love, Jody. Friends, the letter tells of the hope that the world puts on its educators. Fellow educators, the future of every child entrusted to us is ours to help create the nicest future the world can offer. And it starts with a rich learning culture in every school and in every classroom. I wish you the very best in the journey that you are taking. Thank you.
Thank you, Elsie, for that wonderful ending and such a great phrase for us all as value educators to remember that we are helping our children, each of them, to build their future, and all this from a journey of many small steps that these led to not only successful outcomes, but I think essentially built up the spirit of the school, because the principal and the teachers believed that every student can learn. Wow. Our next speaker, Mrs. Wai Yin Pryke, has occupied a variety of roles, both as a school leader, but also as a leader in teacher development at HQ, or what some of you would call the Department of Education. As a result, she will give us the big picture, which is a very good way of concluding this webinar. Wai Yin, please.
Thank you very much, Belinda. And I want to really thank our dear panelists. I have learned so much just from your sharing sessions as well. It's been very inspiring. I feel extremely excited to be here. Very nice to see educators from across Asia. And I want to thank the Head Foundation for just giving me this opportunity. So I'm going to talk about building a culture of learning more from a systems level. I do want to say something. I mean, I was in the Ministry of Education for more than 30 years, but I have left. So whatever I'm sharing with you now is culled from professional experience, but I don't claim to be speaking on behalf of the Ministry of Education. So I hope this is something that we all understand. So the focus of my talk is really like three major areas. One is really to show at a system level how the Ministry of Education, or MOE in short, takes pains to build this culture of learning across the entire system. And we've heard examples from Elsie, and that sort of like excitement of learning, that culture of learning is actually built right from the very top at the systems level. And of course, I will also going to talk about what does it mean to have an ecosystem of learning and how to sustain it. It is so heartening to see that, you know, for Yenny as well, at individual level, at the school level, she's working very hard to build that culture as well. But so it is really seeing from the Singapore perspective, like how we have like the system-wide level and then the school level as well, and then at the more like individual level of every student and every teacher. This is a very common saying. Many of you would know this. It says it takes a village to raise a child, but I would propose that it actually takes a village to raise a good teacher, because as those of us who are teachers well know, skills and competencies takes years to build and takes a lot of mentors and people who would journey alongside us. I'm showing you here something which is publicly available. It's on the internet. It is the landing page of the Academy of Singapore Teachers. So you can see that from here, supporting the teacher is of paramount importance. You can see just from the top level, there is professional development, professional excellence, professional recognition, programs, publications, and also well-being. So how the ministry and how Singapore sees its teachers is that the teacher is a whole person and not just about teaching and learning only and delivering classroom lessons, but really the whole development of the teacher as a person as well. I think what is very interesting, which may or may not be well known, is that there is a lot of emphasis on values. And this is the beginning, the foundation for this culture of learning that we are talking about. You can see that this is in the form of a compass, and like every good compass, it points true north. So with this, it's a strong symbol for all teachers to know that when you come into teaching, you are not coming into a job. You are coming into a vocation. You're coming into a calling. What you're going to do is something very, very special. It's not something that anybody else can do. but only people who are committed, who really feel that they have something to give to build the future that Elsie was talking about. So you may say, why do we start with values? Well, as I have said, it is a fundamental belief that when teachers teach, they are not merely teaching a subject. So we won't have a teacher that says, so what do you teach, right? Or you say like, okay, I teach math or I teach English. Many teachers will instinctively say, actually, I teach the child. I teach a student. So a teacher is not just somebody with content and knowledge. A teacher has to role model what is right, help every child develop as a whole person. So this emphasis that we must make a difference in the lives of students is something that is very, very strongly emphasized. Of course, having the values is the foundation. The next thing really is, well, what do teachers need to learn? So you see this very beautiful orchid. It is actually it frames this thing called the Singapore teaching practice. So this Singapore teaching practice basically defines the learning areas that we would like teachers to grow in. This helps everybody move in the same direction. So you could hear from Elsie's sharing that there is a lot of like different teacher development programs going on. But all these teacher development programs are in tandem with a larger picture of these various areas of learning that we would like all teachers to have. So for example, teachers need to learn about understanding subject matter and goals, understanding students' learning, understanding teaching. And I noticed that when Elsie shared that, the fundamental belief that every student can learn is actually something that's also articulated in our Singapore curriculum philosophy. So it's a very core belief in a system that every child can learn and wants to learn. So when a child is not learning, it's something for the teacher and the school to reflect on, to say, well, why is the child not learning? It's because of the fundamental belief that every child wants to learn. So probably the answer is looking for different ways to engage with the child. So this has been a very useful reference for all schools in the system to know what they need to do in order to structure the learning of teachers. And then of course, for us, the fundamental belief is also that a teacher is the continual learner. I'm just so thrilled by what Yenny shared at the end of her presentation, because she talked about who is a teacher. A teacher has to be that lifelong learner. And this is something that the Singapore system actually believes in as well. You can see that this is a very beautiful picture. And we have orchids, and now we have a gem. And this gem has the different facets that we want for the 21st century Singapore teacher. At the center is the ethical educator. So teachers need to role model that values. Teachers need to make sure that they do what is best for every child. Then we have the competent professional, the collaborative learner, the transformational leader, and the community builder. This to me was a very interesting diagram when I first joined the MOE, because of this idea that every teacher is also a leader. I think that's not something that is emphasized enough, but a teacher takes a lot of control over his or her own learning and development and inspires other people to do so as well. So that leadership aspect of teaching is something that is very strongly emphasized. What we want to see are teachers who are like gems, precious stones, precious, who can really make a difference, can shine and can make a difference. So you may then ask, like, well, how do we sustain this whole ecosystem of learning? So there is that ministry level, there is that school level. But for the teacher himself or herself, we believe very strongly in this concept of teacher ownership, teacher leadership. The teacher must lead his or her own learning. He or she has agency, empowerment, not an automaton, not someone to be dictated to as to how you learn and what you want to learn. So what we do is that there is an availability, there's a plethora of courses for the teacher development and for them to choose from. So in Singapore, we have different levels of like teachers. So you may start with beginning teacher and you're given a lot of support as a beginning teacher at a school level. And then you can move on to becoming a senior teacher after a few years of experience, and then you find that you can actually lead other teachers in your subject area. And then you can even graduate to become a lead teacher. So the difference between a senior teacher and a lead teacher is that whilst the senior teacher works within the school community, the lead teacher actually moves outside of the school and leads teachers from other schools as well on certain projects. And of course, the pinnacle is to become a master teacher. So as a master teacher, you have a national profile. What you do is that you help teachers of the same subject develop certain skill sets, which they may not yet have. But you can see that every stage of a teacher's journey, professional journey, is tracked and also developed. So we make sure that there's enough for the teachers to learn and to be equipped so that they are ready to take on these new roles. Another thing that is really interesting is this idea of communities of practice and learning. That's something that is very welcome by teachers, because this is when they can exercise the most choice. They can choose to join any community. It can be helmed by master teachers, senior teachers, lead teachers, but it also can be something that they start. So if any teacher have a particular interest in IT, in digitalization, it is possible to have a call out, and later on I'll explain how a teacher can do that, and then get people to join that community as well. And perhaps what is quite interesting is this idea that teachers can learn outside of the school and outside of the school context or education context. There is a teacher work attachment scheme that is available for teachers to apply, and they can go outside of the industry or to other industries. Some of them have gone to museums, some of them have gone to IT, some of them have gone to certain industries, such as like service industry, hotels, as well as different kinds of industries, basically, in order to enrich their understanding of the world of work. Because we do understand and we do realize that sometimes education, if you just keep looking inwards, it can be quite inward looking. And we really need something that will stimulate the teachers' imagination, that will help them understand what the world of work is looking for, and then to inspire them to want to try new things and bring new practices into the classroom. So how do the teachers do this? Well, this world has now become very, very complex, even more complex. It used to be that learning was face-to-face, and I would say that most teachers prefer face-to-face and on-site learning. However, as everybody has said, COVID-19 has kind of put paid to many of these things. So now the new thing is digital. That means we have created both face-to-face as well as online opportunities for teachers to meet and learn. So this system is called OPAL, One Portal, All Learners. It's only for the teachers. You cannot access it because it is really just on the intranet. But if you were to go inside, you will see that it's a whole array of different kinds of courses. Some are self-directed. Some are actually formal courses conducted by other teachers, which you have to attend. But what is interesting in this portal is that teachers can form their own communities of practice and communities of learning. So if I were interested in, as I just mentioned, like digitalization or to look at certain programs, what I need to do is to just set up a community there and then ask people to join in. And quite often these small communities do grow because they spread, and there's this sense of participation and this sense of collaboration and learning from one another. And all these things actually culminate in our biannual teachers conference. Whilst held once in 2 years, it is very, very popular and very, very well attended. During these conferences, teachers share with each other the innovations that they have done in their teaching, as well as making sure that they network with each other and then find like new ways of learning and teaching together as well. So what happened when we had this lockdown, and Singapore did go into quite a severe lockdown? It was really fortunate that the Ministry of Education had earlier invested in this super portal, which is meant for all students and parents. It's called the Singapore Student Learning Space. So teachers were already beginning to use this portal to experiment with some home-based learning activities. Of course, when COVID struck, that basically took a huge turn. I mean, this was supposed to be something that would take like many years for teachers to get used to. But because of COVID, suddenly everybody had no choice. They had to go on a portal. They had to learn how to teach digitally. They had to make sure that they look for resources which are not in hard copy, but resources which are online. And so there was a whole of MOE effort to populate even more resources in this portal. So you have people helping with the IT infrastructure. There were Zoom lessons. There were actually like demonstrations to teachers on how to use Zoom and different online platforms. There were so many resources and plans. And then there was a lot of links to outside sites as well, which would enrich the students' learning. It is what is interesting was that, you know, conferences went online, and it was quite an experiment, I must say. Of course, it can never replace the face-to-face conferences, but we found that a lot more people could participate because it was online conference. And so that's one of the advantages of technology, is that you don't need to travel, and you don't really need to kind of like spend a lot of time on site, and you can just like dive in and out of the conferences. So it was really very, very well received. So it's not just the schools. So the schools also make sure that they reached out to other places. So they reached out to the National Heritage Board because they couldn't bring their students out into the learning journey sites. They couldn't go and see the national monuments. So what happened was that since you can't bring the students to the site, why don't you bring the site to the students? So they went on a robot tour, and then they were able, through the eyes of the robot, as well as the facilitator, to see the various national monuments, and the students were really excited, and they asked a lot of good questions. So it is absolutely possible to work with other partners as well in order to enrich the students' learning, and not just within the school or within the education sector itself. Now, I do understand that Singapore is a very small and unique country in that sense. You know, it's possible to do many things centrally. And so it did, like, I was also thinking like, well, how could I make this more relevant? And I understand that for many systems, they may not have the same affordances just because it's just such a diffuse system. So I was wondering whether it would be possible to form alliances with like-minded schools which are nearby. I listened to Yenny share, and I'm just thinking to myself, wow, you know, she's done so many wonderful things with her teachers. Her teachers have really experimented, innovated, and have shown some good success. I wonder whether Yenny School could be one of those schools who could be open to other schools within the area to learn from, and to maybe even co-construct some of the lesson plans together. Similarly, with regard to industry, if you find that actually it's useful to have industry input, to have people from industry speak with your teachers, even if you cannot have a work attachment program, whether it's possible to look for industry within your area and kind of get the boss to come and talk to the teachers, so that teachers have a good understanding of some of the real life skills that are needed. So whatever you do, I would really encourage you to think big, but start small. Decide on one or two areas where you want to collaborate, you know, to have that gotong royong spirit, the spirit of like cooperation that I see, you know, happens so much throughout education systems. And I really hope that you will be able to do something that will really help your teachers and your students learn better. So in conclusion, in the case of Singapore, there is great support for a culture of learning, as well as at the school level, systems level, and the individual level as well. I think time and resources are very important. I want to say that this culture of learning didn't happen overnight. It took many, many years. I remember it really took on a great impetus somewhere around 1997. And the first announcement came up that every teacher is entitled to 100 hours of learning per year. I think many teachers nearly fell off their chairs. It's like, how do I do, what do you mean 100 hours of learning per year? And this is like you're right to go on courses up to 100 hours a year. It just seemed like a lot of time. But we have found that after an adjustment period, teachers actually found that it's really refreshing to go for a course, and it helps them to teach better. And you find the principals relaxing as well. Say, okay, when I release my teachers for a course, they come back recharged and re-energized. It's worth it. It's worth investing in that time for staff learning. So now 100 hours is really not much. We hear from Elsie, right? They have like once a fortnight, they have staff learning sessions. So all these things all build up, but it makes it very exciting to teach, because you know you're not going to stagnate. You know that you're always going to be learning new things from your peers. Of course, at the systems level, there is always a continuous review of approaches to teacher learning and even student learning. Because as times have changed, we find that our teachers need to learn new skills. Digital skills being one example, but also differentiated teaching. Like how do we teach different students with different abilities, with different learning styles? So these are some of the things that's still an ongoing journey for us. And so again, you know, for you, I really wish for you to start applying maybe some of these ideas in a small way, and then let's see how far it takes you. So all the resources actually can be found online in the Academy of Singapore Teachers. And I want to say thank you again for allowing me to share. I hope that you will ask as many questions as you wish later on. And again, you know, thank you to my fellow panelists for such an interesting sharing session. Belinda, over to you.
Thank you, Wai Yin. Wow, that was a really helpful overview. It showed how change can be managed so that the whole school community grows, adapts with increasingly less and less fear. Although in that sense, nothing like a pandemic to just set us off. I know for the longest time, we struggled with this thing about teaching online, and everybody paid lip service and said, okay, we'll do a little bit once a year. And then suddenly it was like every day. But I suppose because the groundwork was being laid, and the more we used it, the more confident we got. Yeah. I mean, I have to confess, I'd never heard of Zoom until last year. Never heard of it. And even if I'd heard of it and people asked me, I said, no, I mean, I didn't even use Skype or Microsoft Teams. Never heard of Zoom. And yet, yes, here we all are, all of us on Zoom. We'd never seen this creature before, right? But now all of us are on Zoom. You see how quickly we all learned. So now when we finally bite the bullet, we find we can do it. We need not to be so afraid of change because we find we can do it. So let me first share the poll results of the poll that you all did earlier. And what was the most important characteristic of a learning culture? A lot of you said it is when you see the students enjoying learning. You know, you all are pretty good at this. You are so right. Because when do they enjoy learning? When the teacher can effectively communicate, right? If there was no joy, if the teacher can't communicate, there is no joy, all right? And of course, also when they find that the teacher is not saying the same old thing, that it's something different every time. So, right, thank you. Joy of learning indeed. Okay, let's now quickly move to the Q&A. And you have all posed some interesting questions. So I've kind of summarized it. And I think this was one of the first questions that came in, which was, what does a culture for learning look like? Now, I know this is very general, so pop in anything you feel that you have contributed, you can repeat it, because I think it's now stringing it together. So what does a culture for learning look like to you? So we start with you, Yenny. Yenny, you've been very hardworking. I noticed you've asked so many questions on the Q&A.
yes. Okay, thank you, Miss Charles. So I actually have been thinking about these questions, and I think I'm talking about teacher collaboration, so I will answer in terms of teachers' perspectives. So I think there is a culture of learning when teachers feel that they don't feel obligated when they, when they have to take a PDA sessions or a training. They feel the need to do it. More than a need, they enjoy it. They find solace in doing it, and they find contentment. And I am so proud, and this is what I have seen from my teachers, because there is also a questions about regarding with the so many education policy changes, there are actually online training by the government. Nobody is requiring teacher to take it. No, it's their own initiative. And the majority of teachers in my school, they are taking this regarding assessment, the replacement of the national examination, and other content in the changes. Yeah, so I think, yeah, when the teachers enjoy learning, so there is a culture of learning.
Yes, I remember when you heard about Wai Yin saying about the 100 hours, all right?
Yeah.
And teachers were told, this is your right. Yeah, this is not your duty. This is your right. You have a right to these hours. Then the whole emphasis changed when teachers saw it as their right. Yeah. Anybody else wants to chip in on this?
I think with regards to the culture of learning, when we see that there's lots of student initiated activities around learning, like when they are hanging out in the afternoons after school, instead of only playing in the basketball court, they also take time to sit around the tables in the canteen to coach one another. There's this culture of learning is becoming very infectious. It's like people want to learn and they have the confidence to ask their peers to help them. And also at Coach One, the teachers used to have consultations. So students can actually approach teachers for consultation. So they can tell, the teacher puts out a schedule saying, okay, on this afternoons, I'll be available. Tell me your topic and who are the ones who want to attend. And kids just log in to say, okay, these are the topics I have questions on. And that shows there's a lot of ownership. And it's encouraging because they are taking the initiative to ask. So for Coach One, for the last many years, we do not have structured remedial after school. So if a child wants support, additional support, it's either the teacher has already picked him up from her class or they have to sign up for the consultation. So that's how they get help. Yeah.
Maybe I go on to another question. Is there a place for home partnership, especially when so many schools are experiencing lockdown? Wai Yin?
Yeah, I mean, definitely home partnership is very important. So one of the things that I heard the Ministry of Education really took away from the whole lockdown was that there was really a need to have had develop a handbook for parents, because parents were very stressed. They were very stressed and very stretched about, from devices, whether they're working, they're not working, to supervising their students, to kind of like managing this whole balance of becoming by supporting their child in their learning without a physical teacher there, during school hours. So that home partnership is really very important, especially when we are switching to a situation which is unfamiliar. But even for the various, even say business as usual, home partnership is really, really important. I'm sure Elsie and Yenny have plenty of stories to tell about how by reaching out to parents, by kind of getting buy-in from them, getting them involved in the school life, that they actually achieve much better outcomes, because then it's like, it's the entire community surrounding the child in a way.
Yes. I remember one of the past speakers in, I think, last week's webinar also shared this. John from the Philippines, and he was saying how his community and his parents lent so much support that they didn't need to ask for further help, just from their own community, and that was such a powerful image. Yeah. What about this peer sharing? Did you see a change in your teachers as they were forced into this new ways of teaching, did you find that they tried to keep to themselves, or did they share a lot more?
They share a lot more.
Uh-huh.
Yes. And what amazed me, you know, at the initial stage, they even do this practice teaching virtually within among small group of teachers.
Yes,
They
yes.
practice screen sharing, media playing, everything, starting, ending the meeting in small groups. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think at AST there was already the structure for PLCs, right? You want
Yeah.
to say something about this,
Yes.
Marie?
Yes, professional learning communities or PLCs are actually some of these, like as I was talking about, those ground up groups that actually happen where teachers come together to share good ideas with each other. And quite often it is somebody with this idea to say, I really want to share, and the master teacher gets in and say, okay, let's look at it and let's try and refine what you're doing. Because sometimes teachers, they're successful in their classroom pedagogies, but they don't know why they're successful. They really not really sure, like, then how would you share something that seems to be so personal, but yet there are underpinning principles that the master teacher works with the teachers to kind of tease out. And then they share it with other teachers from different schools, and they add their ideas as well. So that one innovation then becomes something which is enriched by the inputs of like everybody. And then they take this idea, they go and share in some of the school, they come back with like different experiences. And so this thing can actually grow to become something really powerful.
Wow, wow. I think we'll have to go to the last question now because time is running out. But this is, in fact, I've left it to the last because it is still, I think, a challenge for all of us, especially with the pandemic, the lockdown, and all those kind of things. How do you reach the most disadvantaged students? Want to start first, Elsie?
I think for us, because there was a structure in place, even at the national level. So the guideline was that for the students who really did not have devices, we were able to loan them the school's devices. They could bring it home together with the dongle for the Wi-Fi access. Yeah, so they were quite well resourced. But for those who were even more challenged, they didn't have a home environment where they could do their work, they could actually come back to school, even though it was during the lockdown. Students were given special passes. We had to write in for permits for them to travel to school, especially for some children, okay, their parents are in healthcare, they have to work, and there's no one to supervise their studies. But for those who have disadvantaged home backgrounds, they could also come back. And the school actually took care of these people throughout those weeks of home-based learning, so that they could do their work in school. They had their meals provided and everything provided so that they could actually have a full day in school.
Right.
That's good.
And with you in Indonesia, Yenny?
Yes, as you mentioned earlier, Indonesia is not just Jakarta, and Jakarta with 10 million citizens. So many variations, but I had one student who did not have access to technology at all. No, nothing, not even within reach. So what we do is, because we were not allowed to receive students at school at that time, what we do, we make written syllabus and material and home visit routinely. It's like weekly. But then with that collaboration, now the students has her own gadget. So we did not have that problem anymore. Yeah. So
Yes,
everybody has access to online learning, to a gadget.
That's right. But we forget that there is still always the printed word. And I believe that there was much effort once again from the sharing last week. Our Filipino speaker also talked about, that the teachers would then bring the notes to those students who didn't have the gadgets. Yeah, because connectivity, first of all, was not always good in certain parts of the city or the neighborhood. And so we went back to the written work, right? Okay. Thank you. I think this has been really a wonderful way of sharing about, how the culture of learning has come alive in your schools and even in the systems. And I thought I would pick up something that I believe Vignesh actually talked about. And this was a concept that I heard of actually about 20 to 25 years ago. And it said, you know, schools should be learning organizations. And I think you know where I'm going with that, right? Wai Yin, LO. But at first, when I thought about it, I thought that's so obvious. It's unnecessary to say. Of course, schools are learning organizations because schools are there to help students learn. So it is automatically a learning organization. Why do you now tell us we have to be? We already are. But I got it wrong. I got it really wrong. Schools are not automatically learning organizations unless the school leaders and the school teachers are also learning. It's not just about students learning, but it is about we as adults learning, all right, being a continual learner. That was what you were saying, Yenny. And that's why I remembered this bit. Yeah, totally different perspective. And so as an example of learning, I'm going to now, first of all, ask Jasmine to share the 3 pie charts of the polls. Now, these were polls that were taken before the webinar started. And you'll be able to see where you were and hopefully now where you are. So for example, you look at this one about who in your view has the greatest influence on school culture? And there was a big emphasis on both school heads and teachers. But there was a view that students didn't have much of an influence on school culture. That's interesting because because they do receive the culture, and I think based on that, sometimes when we walk into school, you can feel the culture straight away from the way students are behaving. So I might have given students a bigger role than that. Let's move on to the next pie chart. What relationships did you tap on most during school cultures? And not surprisingly, we tapped most on teachers, all right? But we were beginning to see from what our webinar speakers were saying that, hey, parents can be a very valuable relationship to tap on, and even the community, as successfully shown by some of our speakers. And so today, your poll. What in your view is the most important characteristic of a learning culture? And yes, you remember you had said earlier on the joy of learning, but when we had to force you to split it up, I think you did acknowledge, yes, that leaders must effectively communicate, because if they don't, yeah, all this talk about what we are doing, etc., but if the leader cannot communicate, it's dead. And similarly with teachers, if they think that's all I've learned all I need to know, and I'm just going to repeat it year after year, then there would be no learning culture. There would be no joy of learning. So I think we can see just from these polls, from our original position to where we hopefully have thought about new things since, that we are all continual learners. So thank you, Jasmine, for those polls. We started off realizing, right, in schools everywhere in the region, that we were facing a crisis. The lockdowns, the prolonged school closures, the need for online learning, these were things we had never experienced before. And especially our needy students were most in danger because of their lack of resources and because even of their lack of food sometimes. This needed leadership and empathy. And in fact, that formed the subject for that first webinar series. They talked a lot on the form that leadership had to take. But with this second series, it was a recognition that leaders cannot do it on their own. They must do it with their community, with their internal community, as well as the external. And for that, we needed to build up the school culture. School culture was, in fact, that unseen force that had very visible outcomes. And school culture rested on the relationships being built. Today, we saw that school culture is maintained and refreshed because it is a culture that constantly learns and constantly adapts. This, you have said, is the way to ride the wave of change. And through it all, I hear from speakers the very genuine need to be relevant and to show you care. Doing what makes meaning to your school community, doing what shows your genuine concern for them goes a long, long way to creating that trust that would help you lead your school into the new normal. So a big thank you to all our speakers today, as well as all those who have spoken in the last two webinars. Over to you, Victor.
And thank you very much, Mrs. Charles. I think before we draw this webinar series to an end, I'd like to just share a little bit about my thoughts and that I share with my colleagues about this series. I think as we talked about this towards the tail end of last year, we realized that the pandemic has disrupted our education systems greatly. The pandemic has thrown many systems that we once held very dear, many ways of doing things, into total disarray. Education has certainly been affected badly. But nonetheless, the pandemic has given us an opportunity to also rethink the systems that we have become accustomed to rethink the way that we do things. And in a sense, it has been this inflection point that gives us the opportunity to rebuild and to rebuild stronger and to come out of this crisis better. Because as we shared, I think the purpose of education is clear to many of our viewers. It's the joy of learning for students, right? We want our students to learn. We want them to be equipped with the right skills, the values, and the knowledge that will put them in good stead for a future that would be challenging, but in a future where they would be contributive members, not just to their community, but to the wider global society. So I think the idea of building a positive school culture is very important as we think about rebuilding, as we think about building back stronger. Education systems that have been disrupted have now the opportunity to rethink some of these challenges. And I think our speakers over the last 3 weeks have shared quite a fair bit about this process. We unpacked about the culture building process. We talked about the importance of the 3 Ps, the purpose, the process, and the people. We also discussed quite a bit about the importance of mission statements, how mission statements are able to define the culture within the system. And we also talked about how we can go upstream to look at the root cause of some of these challenges, the problems in culture, and what we can do to try to better define it. We discussed about the relationships of community. We cannot forget our friends Shirel sharing about the CCS, the Chief Culture Shaper. We also talked about relationships within the school. Our speaker from last week, Chopang, talked at length about his innovative model of rethinking education within a school, especially in a school like Singapore, in a place like Singapore, where he turned the CCA groups and they became the foundation of the school instead of the classes. We talked about a culture of care. I think in this time of crisis, that has been something that's been extremely important for all of us. The care that we show to each other, the care that we show not just to our colleagues in the school, to our students, but to the wider community. The examples that were shared by people like Madam Molia about the work that her students had done with the migrant workers communities in Singapore were important in bringing across this idea of care. And today we talk about the learning culture. We talk about the importance of the learning culture among students and among teachers. So ladies and gentlemen, we have unpacked quite a lot of issues around building a positive school culture in the new normal during this webinar series. We hope that you have found the webinar series to be helpful. We hope that you've been able to pick up some tips, some examples, and some ideas that you could potentially implement in your own system. But most importantly, we would like to take this opportunity to ask you to share with us at the foundation topics that you may feel of great interest, that you may feel strongly about, that you would like to see us explore in future webinar series. I welcome you to write these in the feedback forms that will be shared with you after the session in our EDMs. Please do let us know what are the topics that you would like us to think about, that you would like us to cover. I will do our best to address some of them. We'll also be producing a handbook that would summarize some of the findings from this webinar series. And that handbook will be made available on our website. And if you wish to receive a hard copy of the handbook, please do let us know, and we'll try our best to get in touch and to see if we could follow up. So a recording of this webinar is of course available on our website, headfoundation.org, and on our YouTube channel. And I believe in the chat, my colleagues have shared the Google form where you can sign up to receive the certificate. Well, but before we close today's session and this series, I'd like to express on behalf of the Head Foundation, my sincere thanks to our speakers, Madam Molia, Mr. Govin, Mr. Chopang, Mrs. Pryke, Mrs. Jeremiah, Mrs. Shiro, Mr. Jean Francis, Mrs. Yenny, and Mrs. Shirley, for sharing their perspectives, their ideas, their challenges, their struggles, their innovations with us over the last 3 weeks. And I especially like to extend our warmest gratitude to Mrs. Belinda Charles for helping organize and moderate this series. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being a part of our series, and I look forward to welcoming you to our future series. Thank you and have a pleasant day.